Hi everyone, it's Ben from PMaps for Texas here. So now that we've learned the basics of how to create a story map on ArcGIS Online, let's go through an example student research story map based on optical brightener tampling in the Lewisville, Texas area. So I will go from my ArcGIS Online homepage to the content panel. And then in my content panel, I can see all of the story maps or layers that I created. And I'll go to optical brightener contamination in North Texas watersheds. And that's going to bring you to this homepage. You can click Edit Story in the upper right-hand corner to launch your story map. And it's going to bring you to the story map editor where you can change any text or images or videos you'd like. But I'm going to go up here to Preview so we can walk through this as if it were already published. Starting off with the title page, I have a nice descriptive title of my research project. This is limited to a certain number of figures, so you can't have it too long. But you can also enter a subheading as well, and my name is automatically included. You can also set your headings to automatically navigate throughout your story map via these bars. So I have 5 headings: abstract, introduction, methods, results, and discussion, and those all align with parts of a successful research project. But I can set those to allow me to navigate easily throughout the story map just by clicking those. So, walking through the story map, my abstract is a very brief description of my research project, very small amount of background information, brief overview of my methods, and a qualitative review of my results. So I don't want to include all of the numbers and all of my statistical results, but just tell the reader basically what happened. Moving on to my introduction, I want to provide enough background information so the reader of my story map understands the basics of my project. So I have some background on optical brighteners, where they're found, what they are, and what they may indicate. So they may indicate the presence of E. coli in watersheds. And then I also embedded this video next to it from SciShow, a great YouTube channel that explains fabric brighteners in a bit more detail. And it's very brief, about 3 minutes long. Below that, still in my introduction section, I have my study objectives. Clearly laid those out. 2 objectives in this study. I want to test for the presence of optical brighteners in Lewisville, Texas waterways. And then I want to identify any hotspots of optical brightener contamination by watershed. In this case, it's actually sub-watershed because they're subdivided a bit further. But I want to figure out which geographical areas have the most contamination so we can target those areas for cleanup. And I embedded a nice picture of another urban stream here. Moving on to my methods section, this is where I want to explain how I did my project. Starting off with my study area, I'm explaining that I collected samples from 4 different watersheds in the Lewisville, Texas area. Moving on to define those and explain the area they encompass as well. Went on to explain how I deployed my samples for 48 hours and that I sampled all my watersheds evenly. Here's a really nice example of a natural stream site that would be great for tampling. You can see there's actually a bridge up here as well, so sampling along multiple points in this stream would be a great idea. And then below that, I have 2 links embedded. First is the tampling protocol, and this is going to link to a Google Drive with the tampling procedure, all the instructions of how to do this research. And then a video about the tampling procedure as well, which is linked via Facebook. Linking videos directly from Facebook is not compatible yet, so I couldn't actually embed it. That's why I had to provide the link. Still in my methods section, moving on, I have a little bit of an explanation of my data collection process. And the good thing about story maps is you can make these very visual and include a bunch of links and embed a bunch of things. So the text can be pretty brief. It can be a more visual medium. So I have a QR code to my survey. I also have a link to my tampling survey as well in case somebody doesn't want to scan the QR code. And then I went on to explain how I collected data using the Survey 123 field map and ArcGIS. I also moved on to explain a bit about my data analysis, and all of these headings here, these are subheadings. So they don't create these navigable bars, but they're a great way of breaking up your story map a little bit. These orange bars are also separators. They change in style based on the design or theme you're using, but they can be used also to break up chunks of your story map. My data analysis portion goes on to explain how we actually scored our data. So we scored for the presence of optical brighteners, it's either high, medium, low, or none, or unknown. And then explain that we mapped them on ArcGIS Online using a watershed layer as well. And then I explained a bit more about my statistical analysis. It's very, very simple analysis, nothing too complex here, and um, not too statistically rigorous. But I just went ahead and converted my low, medium, high, and unknown scores into a numerical value that I could then use to sum up the optical brightener contamination score by watershed. And then my results section, I want to start that off with a map. I have this set on the medium size. I have the legend set to always show, but the user can easily navigate through this map, expand it if they'd like, return back to the central point of the map, etc. And then I have a few graphs just explaining the optical brightener scores both by watershed and by water source. Brief verbal descriptions next to each of those, and then the discussion about what we found. So, based on our results, it appears the Timber Creek watershed, which encompasses the Flower Mound area, contained the highest optical brightener score. You can see here on the map, these two, well, this entire kind of lengthy watershed going diagonally downward from the upper left to the lower right, that's the Timber Creek watershed. And you can see that's the only spot that we had these two high results, as well as a bunch of other low results. We had a few lows and a bunch of other none results. We had a few nuns and a few lows elsewhere, but it seems like this area in Flower Mound is where we might have maybe the oldest infrastructure for the septic system, which may be causing leaks. And my discussion goes on to explain how it would be a good idea to contact city officials in the Timber Creek watershed and alert them of the optical brightener presence, and then do some more sampling to further nail down exactly where those areas of contamination are, so you can target those areas for cleanup.